Welcome to Season 4 of Grief in Common. You're listening to different voices from the Winston Swish youth team.
We're a group of grieving young people who are helping to shape the future of grief support.
We're all different, but we've all got grief in common. If you are aged 13 or over, this podcast is suitable for you.
Winston Swish is a charity that supports children and young people who are bereaved or facing the death of someone important to them. And this podcast is our space to talk honestly about what that feels like.
We'll be sharing our ideas, experiences and conversations that we hope will help you feel less alone. If you'd like to help us keep this going, you can donate at winstonswish.org. Thank you.
In this episode of Grief in Common, we mention cancer, strokes and COVID, and we talk about grief and death throughout.
Hi guys, welcome back to Season 4, Episode 1 of the Grief in Common podcast. You might have heard me before. I'm Grace, and my dad died when I was 8 years old of pancreatic cancer, and I'm joined with Jess today. Hi Jess.
Hi, so as Grace said, my name is Jess. I am 20 years old and I lost my dad 3.5 years ago when I was about 17, really suddenly to a stroke.
Well, today we're going to be talking about funerals and wakes and going back to school and all these different type of things. So yeah, Jess, I don't know if you want to kick off.
Yeah, so I suppose I'll start with kind of my dad's funeral. We'll kind of start there. I feel like that's a good point. So my dad passed away kind of at the end of the COVID thing. So there was still quite a lot being affected by COVID. So we had to wait a little bit longer for the funeral. So it was, I think, about a month and maybe a bit more. Some people's only is 2 weeks. So I just remember kind of having this like 4-week period of waiting for this like big event. No idea really what to expect. I'd been to funerals, but never anyone that I was, anywhere near the front row for, if that makes any sense. I decided I wanted to speak at my dad's funeral. So that's kind of something I did that was really important to me. So I kind of had that all written and everything. And then, I got to the day of the funeral. I decided to go to the hairdressers that morning. Don't know quite why that was, part of my headspace. But when you're going through grief, you do all sorts of interesting things and make all sorts of interesting choices. So I remember doing that and, I'd got a new dress and everything. We had a funeral in the church and then went to a crematorium for a small service afterwards. And I don't know kind of if you want to do a little bit about yours and then we can kind of go back to the day itself, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Well, my first funeral was my dad's funeral. So I was 8 when my dad died and I was just at the end of school. So I was just like finishing, is it year 3, I think. I also decided to speak because all 3 of my brothers were going to speak. So I wanted to as well. And I remember I don't remember anything between him dying and the funeral. It's really weird. I just remember the funeral, standing up there in front of all these people, and saying my little poem of my daddy was so great. And I think I went last, so I choked it up a little bit, but I didn't really understand what was going on because afterwards we went to Gloucester Rugby Club for his wake, and it was just like a massive party. All my friends, 2 of my friends came from school, and it was it just felt like I was having a play date with my friends. And then I don't really remember much else after. It was weird. Whereas compared to my nan, which was my dad's mum, she died 2 years later on my birthday, and her funeral hit me like a ton of bricks. It was horrendous because I was a bit older, so I knew a bit more about what was happening, and it wasn't just this fun, my friends weren't there and I was with all my family, and it was really really sad.
Yeah, I get you. I think so. My friends all came to my funeral. They kind of all, left school for the day. I was very fortunate. I think there is so much to be said. I know kind of we were very different ages, but so much to be said for having friends there and them making that day better, whether it's for different reasons or not. So, I was very fortunate to have my friends there, and I just remember, as you said, like getting up and I just looked at all these people. I saw my old head teachers in the audience. That was a weird one. I was like, I'm not quite sure what you guys are doing here. And I was like, keep making eye contact with all sorts of people. I wrote my dad a letter. So that's kind of what I did as my speech instead. Because I was like, I'm not really doing it for the people that are in the audience to tell them about him. I'm doing it for my dad. So I was kind of like, I want to talk to him. So that's what I did, is I wrote him a letter. And when I was reading it out, I just remember I kind of couldn't find out where to look. And I also went last. So yeah, definitely got a bit like I'd already had to deal with all the other speeches. And I was like, brilliant. I'm just getting more emotional by the minute. This is perfect. And then I caught eyes with my mum, and I have a half sister who's just my dad's kid, but so we're like half sisters, but she's really close to my mum. And I caught eyes with them, and they were both crying when I was speaking. So I was like, right, don't look there. And then I looked down, and then I saw my dad's coffin, and I was like, definitely don't look there. That's not a good option. So I was like, who can I look at? I was like trying to just spot someone, and then I was like, why are my old head teachers here? That's a bit random, but thanks guys for coming. The room was packed and there was people outside and all sorts, like over 100 people there. I was quite okay, I feel like, at the funeral service. And then we got to the crematorium, and like that is when I just remember having like the biggest breakdown of my life. I had a couple of friends whose parents had gone, so they were able to drive to the crematorium as well. And they've all said like it's like scarred them. Just all you could hear apparently was just me sobbing. And I was like, brilliant, perfect. That is just what I needed. And yeah, I just remember I couldn't stand up. My uncle on my mum's side is a funeral director. So he did the funeral, and he said, everyone stand if you're able for this hymn. And I just remember, the idea of that is obviously for someone that's typically a bit older or doesn't have mobility or anything. And I just couldn't stand up. I was like, I'm not standing up. No, thanks. And I had like my cousins holding me on either side when I had to come out. Because I just remember it was awful. Like the funeral, I feel like itself was a bit like, I was kind of like, this is okay, not too bad. I got a bit sad at a few points, but I was like, this is, I'm putting up appearances here. I feel like you do feel like that a little bit at funerals. You've kind of got to put on that brave face to an extent, especially for everyone else. I've always felt, quite responsible for my mum, and I didn't want to make her sad. And then, yeah, I just remember the crematorium. I was like, that's what felt like it was for me. And that's when I really realized what was going on. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, how am I in this? How is this like what I'm going through, But yeah, I don't know kind of if you had like just the one, or if you felt similarly at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think so my dad had a church service and a crem service, and I don't remember the crematorium at all. I'm half tempted to say I didn't go, but I think I did go. I can't remember. But I've had like a few funerals since, and every single one hits me really deep. It's interesting, like having friends at my funeral, and then I was the friend at my best friend's dad's funeral, and I didn't know her dad that well, but he used to take us to swim in and wait in the car, and I wanted to be there for her, and being that friend, I felt like I had to be strong, but then I was also feeling it really deep inside, and I was finding it really hard to stay strong. And I don't know if it's like flashbacks of my own dad's funeral, or knowing that the pain my friend is going through. And I think I feel that every funeral I go to, it's like I've been in that front row and I know exactly how bad it feels. And now whatever funeral I go to, I feel like they hit really hard every single time. This sounds really bad, but I don't mean it bad. But it's not necessarily because of that person. It's because of all of the feelings and the pain and the emotion that I felt at my dad's funeral, I'm feeling all over again because I'm at a different funeral. And I find it really hard to I always cry. I'm always crying. I'm always emotional. So, yeah, it's a really weird feeling because I'm upset for the person that I'm there for, but I'm also upset for myself all over again.
Yeah, no, I completely get you. I think I've been to one funeral, I believe, since my dad passed away. And it was someone I was close to, but it was like my mum's best friend. So I remember going, and I just walked into the crematorium, and I was like, this feels just like my dad's funeral, literally, because they always look the same. Do you know what I mean? There's no, variation there. It kind of looks the same. The air feels just as thick. And I remember I felt more upset, like, for my mum and for everything like that than I necessarily did myself. And I kind of was, as you said, like, remembering those emotions and knowing, because, she had a daughter similar age to me. We've always been close. I was like looking at her and I was like, I know exactly how she's feeling, yet I don't at the same time, because obviously it's a completely different person. But I know what it's like to be the kid of that person that's, kind of in the coffin at the end of the room, if that makes sense. And I know exactly how that feels, and I just wouldn't want that for anyone. So, as you said, like, I always would want to be there for my friends. I kind of tell that to anyone. Like, people often ask me kind of things about if I know someone going through grief, like all that sort of stuff, like what would I suggest? I'm like, please, if you can make it, like, please go to that person's funeral, because as you said, like, it makes life so much easier. And I think it is that thing of being able to support the person that you love going through grief is a really powerful thing to do as well, because it makes such a difference, I think, in that day. But yeah, like, as you said, like, funerals, just such weird days, such weird occasions in life. I remember, like, planning my dad's, it was just, we just sat there and, like, some of the things they were saying, I was like, what? We've got to think of that. I was like, I don't know. I just remember being told we had to follow the hearse down to the church. And I was like, what do you mean I've got to follow it? And they were like, yeah, we walk down. And I was like, sorry, I've got to walk behind it. They were like, yeah, it's going to drive really slowly. And I was like, I called it the depressing carnival. And that's what I still call it to this day, because I just thought that concept was absolutely mental. I was like, what do you mean I have to follow, my dead dad in a hearse in front of me through my whole village, through everyone that I've ever known, because everyone in the village knows everyone. And it's just, I just do think it is the weirdest day, and the weirdest things feel like they happen, but it's like, it is just such a surreal moment. I know, like, I'm very much the sort of person that remembers everything, but like my mum just completely blocks things out. And it is, I think everyone just remembers and acts and feels so differently on a day like a funeral as well.
It's really hard to, like, get your head around every single thing that happens in a funeral. I mean, my granddad died a year ago, and I was a lot more involved in like the actual things of a funeral. Like, my auntie asked me if I wanted to carry him, be one of the pallbearers, and also, like, I did the prayers at the funeral, and I also did like a eulogy. And like, I'd never been that involved in a funeral before, and knowing that, like, there's so many different steps that you have to do. And I remember on the day, like, the funeral director's in front of me and he's like, right, you're going to go on your left foot to start walking. And I'm like, right, okay, I can do this. What do? Go on my right foot. And I'm like, this is like, and then I'm crying because I've gone on the wrong foot. And then I'm like crying my eyes out. And he's like, are you all right? Do I need to step in? Because obviously your shoulders shake when you cry, don't you? And I've got my granddad's coffin on my shoulder. And I'm like, I've never even thought that this would like go through my head. Like, I never even knew that like all these different things you have to do, and preparing for that is quite hard. And you've got to really, really be kind to yourself and just like only do what you can and only do what feels right. Because like the day before my granddad's funeral, he came home and he had an open coffin, which for me is like, I was not vibing that, and I pushed myself too far, and I went in and I was like, no, I don't want to do this. And I think you have to really like take check of what's going on and how you feel, and actually it's really okay to put boundaries in and be like, I'm not going to do that. Like you getting your hair done, that is like the perfect example of making yourself like, it's a way to prepare. And someone thinking, oh, you went to get your hair done on your dad's funeral, if you've not been grieving or had a bereavement, some people would be like, that is odd. But like, actually it's things like that that help you regulate and help you prep for what's going to happen.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, we decided as a family, it was kind of something my dad had seen on the TV like years earlier and said how much he loved it. So in the whirlwind that is grief, we decided it'd be a good idea to paint my dad's coffin ourselves. So
Wow.
we had the funeral directors, really odd concept. We were the only people the funeral directors had ever seen do it. We basically got them to get us an unvarnished coffin so that we could paint it. So my niece and nephew, to my dad's grandkids, and then me, my mum and my sister all went, and we sat in the funeral home in the back rooms because there was nowhere else to do it. No one ever goes there, but no one also ever paints their parents' coffin. So, fair enough. And we'd got loads of acrylic paint and we painted it. We put flowers on it. My mum he had a classic car. My mum drew his classic car on it. My niece and nephew put like granddad, and, one of them did like an ice skate because he used to take them to their ice skating lessons. I just remember being sat there and I was like, this is so weird. I was like, this is so weird. I'm sat here like finger paint, like putting my handprint on my dad's coffin, like finger painting it. I was like, what? And we went to the shop and we bought loads of paint, and the guy at the checkout was like, oh, you guys doing some arts and crafts? And we were like, yeah, yeah, some arts and crafts. Yeah, I'm just not going to go into that. When you're going through grief, especially when you come to those moments, it is just, I do think you just become a bit weird for a few months. I mean, I still am, but you do kind of do some weird things and come up with some weird ideas and all that sort of stuff. And I think it is those sort of things that funerals really bring to light. I got put in charge of choosing the flowers for my dad's. That was kind of my choice in the funeral. I got to choose the flowers that went on his coffin. And I decided like I would dry all the flowers and then I'm keeping them for one day if I get married to have as confetti at my wedding, because I was like, well, my dad won't be there and he was the first man to buy me flowers. So it feels kind of right. And that is a slightly odd choice, I will say, like, funeral flowers at my future wedding, if it ever happens. But, you do these things. As I say, I feel like when you go through grief, you make these choices, and it's one that I feel like it'll come out nicely in the future.
I'm sorry, that is so iconic that you painted his coffin. I love that. I am so putting that in my will. Yeah.
It was really something, I will say. It was, real work of art, that.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Like someone dying and going to their funeral and makes you think of all the things that they're not going to be at. Like, I think that's such a lovely idea about preserving his flowers and keeping them for your wedding. That to me, that sounds like absolute perfect way to incorporate your dad into an event that he won't be able to be at. And I think you think of events that come in your life and how do you go to them? How do you be normal and how do you enjoy like new events and stuff? And I think it's really hard to, like, I'm 25 this year and I've decided to have a massive birthday. I'm following in my dad's footsteps of let's go out, let's have a big bash. And it's like not even a big milestone, but I thought I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to have a big party. I'm going to celebrate, being alive and having friends, and loads of people are going to be there that knew my dad. And it's like I get to honour him by doing things that he loved, like having people around, being with people. It feels like the perfect kind of way to honour him, even though it's my birthday.
Yeah. I think grief does give you that like perspective of you literally could die tomorrow and like you won't have done half the things you might have wanted to do. So just do it now. And, don't wait for those things in 20 years because the 20 years might not come, if that makes sense. And I think grief gives you that real perspective. And I think there's nothing else that, I think some people will always try and think that way, but I don't think anything quite knocks it into you like grief does. I think it really shoves that in your face and is like, well, for me anyway, we had no idea what was going to happen to my dad. It was very much he had a stroke on the Saturday and he passed away on the Tuesday. And I think, there was no warning for us there at all. So I do think that's kind of, a very big part of grief anyway, is especially, wanting to do stuff. I mean, I had a big 18th. My dad passed away when I was 17, but it was the year I turned 18. And I had a big 18th birthday party. And actually, when my dad had his stroke, I was actually out viewing the venue for my 18th birthday party. So I then chose to go for that venue partly because I was like, well, you know what, when my dad had his stroke, this is where I was. This, you know, he knew I was coming to see this place. He knew I was looking at this. So this feels right. And as you said, like trying to honour them, even though it's not about them and it's kind of past that point and it's nothing to do with them passing away. But you do always, I feel like, have that element of like, oh, I want to honour that person in certain things that I do.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's weird, isn't it, how to some people it can be something totally mundane or so simple, but I somehow always like can relate things back to my dad or things that he would like or doing it for him and why not, and life's too short. And I think you're right, grief really does give you that perspective, and it gives me such a sorry, probably not allowed to do this on the podcast, so you might have to edit this out, but an effort attitude. I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to absolutely do everything. Why not? Let's just go on a holiday, you know, have the party, meet the friends for drinks on a school night and things like that. Definitely.
I do think grief comes with positives sometimes. And I think, you know, those positives have come from something negative, but actually some of my like happiest times have been since grief, because actually I prefer the way I am now and I prefer the attitude to life that I have now. And you know what, whilst I'd still love to have my dad here, it's given me some really valuable like life lessons. I think I feel much happier, I feel like, in myself. And that is something that's come from grief in terms of, you know, as you said, like I'm planning on traveling next year post graduation, and that's not necessarily something I would have done because I'm like, well, I have to do it now. I want to, you know, look back and be like, I did that and I did all that stuff I wanted to do, because why not? Life is too short.
So like I said, my dad died in the summer. And I remember the morning that he died, I really wanted to go to school because in my head he was going to be there when I came home. And I think I only had about a week. I had a week off school. I had quite a small, like, village primary school. I was the only one in my class that had been bereaved at the time. And I think it's so weird because one minute you're sat, you know, eating your breakfast, having some fruit and yogurt, loving life. And then the next minute I'm being thrust into a classroom and everyone's looking at me like, oh, she's the girl whose dad's just died. I really struggled actually going back to school after the summer holidays because everyone had forgot. Everyone had just like, you know, it's been 6 weeks. No one really knows what's good. Like, no one knows how you're feeling. And I remember like being really upset. Like, I think it was about 6 months later in school, and I was really upset about my dad. And they were like, "Why are you crying?" Like, obviously they're a kid; they don't know. Like, they're 8 years old like me, and they're like, "Why are you crying? Wasn't that like so like 6 months ago?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I'm really upset about it. I'm really hurt, and I really don't know how to cope with this situation. And I think it was so weird in the summer because my mum's best friend got married and my mum's sister got married. And it was really hard in the holidays because we were like supposed to be having such happy times. Like, you know, everyone's in their sandals and their shorts, swimming, eating ice creams. And I'm like, me and my mum were like, we're really upset, you know, at the wedding. And it's just so weird going back to something so familiar, but it all feels completely different when you're a changed person, aren't you, straight away? I don't know how it was for you.
Yeah, so obviously, like, we were kind of very different kind of age groups at school. I was kind of year 12, but kind of quite a similar sounding experience. My dad passed away in the March. I kind of, you know, obviously was the age where everyone had social media. So, you know, in classic Gen Z fashion, made an Instagram post saying my dad had passed away, you know, and that's more for me. I've always enjoyed posting about my dad on social media just because I'm a talker. I like to get it out, and sometimes there's no one to talk to about it. So I'm like, I'll just write it down myself and post it on Instagram and people can just deal with it. And that's that. So kind of everyone knew and everyone was aware of what had happened. And obviously all the teachers had been told. And as you said, I went back to school quite soon afterwards as well. So, you know, for a little bit of context, I did 2 BTECs and 1 A level, and with BTECs, you sit the exams, some of them in year 12. So I was, you know, getting ready to sit some exams, and It'd been a week and I was like, I've got to go back to school. And they were like, are you sure? We'd kind of, guessed you wouldn't come back this term. And I was like, no, like I've got exams to prepare for, guys. I've got my A-levels in 2 weeks. Like I've got to do something. I was really close to all the senior leadership team and everything. And I walked into the office. They didn't know I was coming in, and they were just like, sort of looked like the senior ghost. They were like, what are you doing here? Like, why are you back? And I was like, I can't cope with being in my house, because the only thing in my house is Dad's died. That's it. There's nothing else going on. Everyone's upset. Everyone's in a mood. Everything's sad. It's just, there's literally nothing to talk about. No one wants to leave the house, so I can't go anywhere. I can't drive. I'm coming to school. So I was back for, I think, maybe a week, or it was a week and a bit, something like that, within 2 weeks. And then it was Easter holidays. And then I had the Easter holidays, and kind of, at first everyone, a bit like you, kind of was walking on eggshells, a bit like, oh, I don't know what to say to her. Like, I know it's happened, but we're not that close. I don't really know how to offer support. And then I went back after Easter, and my dad's funeral fell, I think, 3 days after we went back. And I remember kind of driving from the church to the crematorium behind the hearse. And I just remember we went past my school and I saw everyone on lunch break, like playing in the field outside. And I was like, how I wish that was me right now. I was like, this is so like dystopian. It just felt like I was another person. This is how I picture it in my head. You see like a bird's eye view of Times Square, and you see the main character stood in the middle, not moving, and everyone else like speed walking around them and like dashing this way, this way, this way, this way. And this one person that you're like watching is just stood in the middle. That is always how grief has felt to me. It's like I was still there. Like I'm still stood in the middle. Everyone else is running round about me. I felt like a ghost. I didn't know. I was getting myself to my classes because I'd been at the school for 6 years and I had muscle memory, not because I knew what I was doing, not because I was concentrating, not because I was thinking consciously about what I was doing. Like, this is all new to me. I have no idea how to cope with this. And yeah, I just remember like after my dad's funeral, I kind of had the day off afterwards, and then went back, and then I was late in on the Friday, and they were kind of like, oh, are you okay? Like, why were you late? And I was like, just picking up my dad's ashes. And I was like, don't know what else you want me to say, really. Kind of, it was so weird, like properly going back. And then I remember standing when I was doing my funeral speech, and I'd written it. I mean, to be fair, I wrote my funeral speech the day after my dad died. I'm very much have a lot of thoughts, and they're all floating around in my head all the time. My head's very loud. I remember getting to the funeral, and I was literally stood up there reading it, and I read over this bit at the start, and it was a bit to my dad, and it kind of said, yeah, I've got an A-level in 8 weeks. And then I was stood up there and I read it, and I was like, I wrote this 6 weeks ago. I was like, I've got an A-level in 2 weeks. It's like, brilliant. And it kind of didn't twig until I was literally stood up there in front of all those people, and I was like, how am I gonna like get my head into this? Like, I'm stood at my dad's funeral. How am I gonna get my head into doing an exam in 2 weeks? And then I had another one 4 weeks after that, and I was like, this is mental. It was so bizarre going back to school and sitting my A-level exams, and my teachers were trying to like contact the exam boards and be like, can she have special conditions? And they were like, no, not really. Because it's only the first exam of the BTEC. Her final grade won't be till next year. So you'll have to ask us for the special conditions on the exam results next year. And then next year came and they were like, no, it's been too long. It's been a year. She doesn't need special conditions. And I was like, cool. Won't get the extra grades on my exams then. Typical exam boards. And that wasn't, my school's fault. They were brilliant. They like my sixth form sent me like the biggest bouquet of flowers from all the teachers, and it was like they were like perfect and reacted to everything perfectly. And yeah, like I had to like sit all these exams, and I was just sat there and I was like, I really don't care what Lucy's tax certificate says from her business.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting, isn't it? How, like, you wouldn't ask someone who'd, I don't know, broke their leg to run a marathon like 10 days later, but, your dad dies and you're speaking at his funeral, and then 2 weeks later you have to sit an A-level. It's like, it doesn't compute, does it? That those things coexist in the same brain space.
The way your body functions is completely, like, to me, it was completely out of my control. I had no control over what my body was doing, and I didn't even feel like I had control over what my brain was thinking. Like, all these things you just think in the night, and I'd be like, why are you thinking about that? And it was just things I would never have done before. And I was like, it was just like no part of me had control.
when my best friend's dad died, he died the day before our English GCSE. And I remember thinking, thank goodness my dad didn't die the day before my English GCSE, because I could not fathom how she turned up for school the next day and was like, just stick me in a separate room and I'll just give it a go. And I mean, she won't mind me telling you this now, but she got A stars and A's without the special consideration. And I was like, girl, you must have just been on like pure adrenaline and superhuman powers, because I felt like I would have not have been able to even function. Like you say, your body does stuff without you knowing, like your mind, how your mind works. Like my brain, the trauma that I have blocked out, that I cannot recall one moment in between him dying and his funeral, is insane. Like I can't tell you anything. It's just black. And she sat like 20 GCSE exams and passed them all with the lowest grade being a B. I was like, you are insane. I am so proud of you.
This is what I mean. And it is, as you said, like, my mum won't mind me saying this. She very much remembers nothing of that whole period. She doesn't remember any of the funeral, any of the wake, any of the gap in between. Whereas I literally could tell you what the room smelt like, what it sounded like, what it looked like. I could tell you anything that you want to know. It's photographed in my mind. And when I went to say goodbye to my dad, I remember the hospital room like it was yesterday. As I say, you do weird things in grief. He hadn't even quite died yet. But I was like, I suppose it's not that weird, but I'd had a uni open day event like the week of, and he'd had COVID, and that wasn't why he passed away, but he'd had COVID. So I hadn't shown him all the brochures of all the unis I'd seen at this fair. And I was like, oh, he's never going to get to know which uni I'm going to go to. And I was like, he's unconscious and probably can't hear me, but I know I wouldn't take all these brochures in with me into the hospital. And I got there and he was in A&E, I believe. So it's fairly like tight security there. It was just past COVID. As I said, it was kind of 2022. So it was kind of, we were through the pandemic, but in the hospitals, it was very much still, you had to go through, a sanitary station and put a mask on and all this stuff. And I remember getting to the desk at A&E, and I was crying, and the woman at the desk went to my mum, "Oh, is she sad?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, and I just looked at this woman and just didn't say anything, and I was like, "Yeah." And then anyway, I was like, "Oh, am I?" Because we hadn't been able to bring anything into the room previously, because obviously we didn't know at this point whether he was going to make it or not. So it all had to go into you kind of go through a little room, leave your stuff in there, and then go into the room that they're in. And I was like, "I've got all these uni brochures. Am I able to take them in?" She went, "I'm going to have to check." And I said to him, I said, "But you've told me he's dying tonight. What's it going to make a difference?" And she went, "Yeah, I suppose." And I was like, it just kind of came out, and I didn't mean to say it. That's not the sort of thing. I'm not the sort of person that would, talk back or say things, anything like that. And I just came out, and I was like, "You've told me he's dying in like 2 hours time. What's it going to do? Is it going to give him an infection? And he's, going to pass away an hour earlier?" "Oh no." What I was like, I literally was like, "I don't know what to say to you right now." She went, "Yeah, I suppose it'll be fine." And I was like, thanks guys, perfect. So anyway, I went in, I took all these things in. He couldn't open his eyes. I was like, I don't know quite what I was showing him, but you do, as I say, you do these weird things. You don't quite know what you're doing with yourself. And yeah, like, it's just so different. It's just so interesting how different people process grief and different people process these things. I have always I've always anyway, advocated for myself and done what I wanted to do. And, I remember at school, my dad died on the 29th of March, so literally right at the end. And in May is Stroke Awareness Month. And I went to my school, I said, I want to do an assembly on Stroke Awareness Month. And they looked at me and they went, "No, we're safeguarding here. No." And I was like, "I'll record it on Zoom and you can play it." If someone I knew had someone pass away and was like, "I'm going to do an awareness assembly a month after they died on the thing they passed away from," I'd be like, "Don't do that." But you don't think that way at all. You have no logical brain and no logical sense of what's going on.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think I've grown in confidence in my grief. So I don't think necessarily for me it was at the start, but as I get older and as, you know, my friends experience their own things and, you know, I make relationships and stuff, I have this thing that probably takes it too far, but I just think it's hilarious. I just love making people uncomfortable about my dad being dead. I just love it. I don't know why. It just makes me laugh that they feel so uncomfortable and I'm just there laughing. But I have this thing called dead dad perks because
Right.
I'm blessed that he left me a bit of money and I've been able to go traveling and do stuff like that. And, you know, things that happen, like my mum got £25 off her shower the other day because she played the single mother widow card. And I was like, what a dead dad perk. Like, that is great. And I love a dead dad joke. I love, you know, I'm like you. I love sharing my dad on social media. I love saying his name. And I love being confident in that he was my dad. His name was Andy. I'm going to talk about him. And I don't care how you feel about that, because actually this is my story to tell and this is his story. And he deserves to be heard. And I think that's where my confidence comes from, like, and being able to put myself in positions where I'm outspoken and I'm really honouring him. I really like doing that. I mean, I definitely wouldn't have done that when I was like 8 years old, but 16 years later, I'm like, I can do anything. I'm like, I can do it. I can speak in front of the king and I'll do it. Do you know what I mean?
No, I love that. I completely agree. I mean, I love a funny TikTok of making a TikTok that my dad's passed away. And my favourite hashtag will always be hashtag Dead Dad Club, because I just think that's funny. And that's my sort of humour. People in my comments are like, Jess. And I'm like, what? He's dead. What do you want me to say? I'm like, what else do you want me to say? That is the facts. And, you know, the coffin painting is always features in the TikToks. It's great. It's the only photo I have of any of those things. So I'm like, guys, there it is, everyone. You know what? You've got to get some perks out of it. You've got to get some benefits from the fact that you had to go through grief. I think it's the only positive, really, isn't it? You know, like, I work in a department store, and so, you know, all the events are quite a big thing in there, you know, shopping wise. And I remember them saying, yeah, guys, there's this big thing coming up. Yeah, sorry, guys, it's Father's Day. And they're like, oh my God, you're not working. You don't have to work. And I was like, sold, thank you. And I was like, you know what? I deserve it, because I had to lose my dad when I was 17. And I think that's the attitude everyone that's gone through grief should have, to an extent. You know, there are certain places that it draws the line, but I think to an extent, you've had to go through grief. Some people haven't had to do that yet, and everyone will. But I think you have to get those perks where you can get them.
Defo. Ride the wave. Take all you can.
I got some great birthday presents that year, I'm not going to lie.
Love it. And your 18th as well. Everyone's like, go big.
I was like, everyone, like, it is my first birthday with my dad dying. Like, it's a rough time. It's rough out there. So I'm going to take the perks where I can get them. And I'm going to use that now. I like the dead dad perks.
Yeah. Definitely.
I like that.
Oh, thanks so much for joining me, Jess. I love seeing how much we have in common, even though we were bereaved nearly like 10 years apart. So it's so interesting to see what is relevant when you're 8 compared to when you're 17.
No, for sure. And I think I always say to people, like, I always kind of try and bring funerals and stuff up as well, because I think it's the one part of grief I was literally like blind going into. I just didn't know any of it. And I think we spoke up earlier, like, how much goes into it and what a funeral really involves, and emotionally what that involves, especially when you are younger. I think it is, a lot of people haven't been to a funeral before, as you said, and I'd been to like one. And I think, yeah, it's definitely that sort of thing that you just never get told. Definitely always a topic I'm like, oh, other people felt like that too.
Yeah, I think it's a great conversation to engage in, and we definitely need to talk about it more. Definitely. Thanks so much for listening to the Grief in Common podcast. For your support, resources, or to donate and help us keep creating, visit winstonswish.org. See you next time.